Welcome to the 58th Annual General Meeting of the Sussex Wildlife Trust. A rather different AGM this year, so bear with us, we'll see if we can make it all work properly. The panellists should all be here. I think if we end the screen share, we should be able to see everybody. And what I plan to do now is just talk you through some of the housekeeping for Zoom. It's rather different this year, isn't it? I mean, last year I was telling you where the toilets were and what to do in the case of a fire. It's going to be rather different this time, so we'll do what we can. But welcome to the AGM. Yes, I'll go through some of the housekeeping first. I guess a lot of us are now fairly used to using Zoom, but just in case, this is Zoom webinar, so we actually can't see everybody like in some programs. The people you should be seeing now are the panelists. So we won't be able to see any of you. We won't be able to see any of the attendees, but you should be able to see the panelists. If you feel confident enough, I think on the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to see gallery view or speaker view. Probably better to be on gallery view this time. So, or if it's all working, you don't want to touch anything, that's fine. Right, so we are starting. It's a very, very unusual year. That's a massive understatement, really, just to say it's an unusual year. Yes, that's why we're meeting online. It's the first time we've ever met online, obviously. And of course, this is all down to the COVID disease that's going through the country. So it's made very unusual times. And obviously there are loads of tragedies around the country, loads of personal tragedies, as a lot of pressures everywhere, a lot of issues related to COVID. A lot of people have been affected, a very difficult time. I'd actually like to say something else though. We're going to be looking later on. Michael Blencowe is going to give us a talk later on about 100 days of lockdown when it comes to wildlife. But the way I look at it as well is that, putting to one side all the incredible problems there have been, I think there is a message of hope in here as well by the way that humans have responded to this pandemic. Yes, we've actually started to become much more aware of our local spaces. We've started to become much more aware of our local wildlife. It's very interesting to me. People walking past my house who I don't know have been talking to me about wildlife. And I think the message of hope it gives me, even more than in the past, we know all the statistics are bad. We know things are going very badly when it comes to climate change, biodiversity loss, and so on. But actually the message of hope is the way people have responded to this outbreak. We haven't turned into the selfish individuals, intent on our own satisfaction that we've always been told we are. We're not just consumers. We're not just here to exploit. That is not how people have responded. The horror stories would have us believe that we would have turned into monsters and fought each other. World over, there's been a rediscovery of society, and actually people have shown a lot of empathy, a lot of community, and actually that cherishing of your local environment. So yes, we'd have said this a year ago, but everybody would have called me an idealist. But actually, when it comes down to it, humans actually respond well to conditions like this in terms of rediscovering society, rediscovering their local place, and that gives me a hope for the whole change in our human story, in our human nature. So that's my perception of this. I did work for the Sussex Wildlife Trust for 27 years, and I wouldn't have actually stayed there for that long if I didn't have rose-tinted spectacles. But this does give me much hope for the future. So anyway, that's a quick introduction. Welcome to the 58th AGM of the Sussex Wildlife Trust. I'll quickly introduce myself and the panellists. My name's Dr. Tony Whitbread. I'm the president of the Sussex Wildlife Trust. I worked for Sussex Wildlife Trust for 27 years, took early retirement a couple of years ago. So it's a great pleasure to be asked to come back as president for events like this. And on the panel, the panelists you should be able to see at the moment, I'll read them in the order that they appear on my screen. So we have Linda Clark, who's our treasurer. We've got Tor Lawrence, who's the chief executive. Simon Linnington, who's our honorary secretary, and Sean Ashworth, who's our chairman. So welcome to all of those. They're the people you should be able to see at the moment. Okay, we think the AGM will take about an hour. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, we haven't got a precedent for this, so we don't know how long it's going to take. Probably depends on how many questions we get. And then there'll be a talk by Tor about what's gone on over the last year, and a talk by Michael Blencowe, probably for about half an hour, with some more questions and answers. Yes, this is a webinar, so it's not as good as being there in real life, is it? But we should be able to play to the strengths of this being an online thing. And one thing we'd like to do is encourage questions. If you look at probably on the bottom of your screen, if you've got a PC, along the top if you've got an iPad, there should be a function that says Q&A. All the way through from now onwards, if you want to ask questions, please put that in there. Put your name in as well so we know who they come from. And we have lots of people working in the background trying to keep an eye on that, and we'll try to chair and monitor those questions and get them to me at the right time, and I'll try and ask them of the right person. There'll be two places where we're going to be looking at the questions. In item 4, after we talk about the accounts and the trustees' annual report, we'll have some questions then more related to the functioning of the trust, our accounts, our structure and so on. And also a much more general question and answer session at the end of the day after Michael Blencowe's talk. So we'll monitor all those questions. Please keep them coming. I can see they're already building up, which is great. We'll try to handle as many of them as at all possible today. But another advantage of doing it this way is that we'll be able to actually carry on and answer them afterwards if we don't get to them beforehand. By the way, all this is being recorded. It'll be presented on our website afterwards, and the answers to any questions will hopefully be on the website for a time afterwards as well. So hopefully we've covered all bases by doing this. So keep your questions and answers coming in. As I said, you won't be visible, so we won't see your faces or your names. But when you write your questions, please put your name in. Yes, just been reminded. There's often a chat function on Zoom that has been disabled, so there's only the Q&A function. So put all your questions in through the Q&A function. The other exciting thing about being able to do this by Zoom is that obviously this is an AGM, we've got to vote for different things. So very exciting, we're going to be voting by polls that will appear on your screen. This will be quite interesting to see if we can make it work. So when we have to vote, what we'll be doing is putting a poll on the screen which will simply say for, against or abstain. So to each of the questions I'm going to ask you later, please could you engage by saying whether you're in favour of the motion, against it, or whether you're abstaining. I have to say we've also had, I think, 27 proxy votes, and we'll be adding those in as well. If I can't do it in my head at the time, we'll do that afterwards as well, so that they will all be considered. Okay, I think I've run through most of the housekeeping. Excellent. The other thing is that, if you remember from the AGMs, we have proposers and seconders for all the motions. Now, to make it run smoothly, we've got those in advance. So if I remember, I'll be reading out the proposers and the seconders before we do the different votes. Great. So as I say, the AGM will run for about an hour. That'll be followed by a 10-minute talk from Tor and then a 30-minute talk with 20-minute questions from Michael Blencowe. Very exciting. At the end of this, we'll be awarding the David Streeter Award to an outstanding young naturalist, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. And we aim to finish by about 12:45. Let's see how we get on. Excellent. So with that background, I think what I'll do now is I'll officially open the AGM, and we'll get on with the agenda in hand. First of all, of course, we had our meeting last year. We had a proper meeting with real people, tea and biscuits and everything, a bit different to this year, and the minutes of the last meeting are the first item. So we have to look at the minutes. Sorry, I should have also said, we'd like to note the apologies that have come in. So far, we've had apologies from one member, and from the trustees, we have apologies from Sarah Bonneau-Tijar. So apart from that, they're all the apologies that I know. Moving on then to the approval of the minutes. The approval of the minutes from last year has been proposed by Henry Brocklebank and seconded by Amanda Reeves. Now, if this all works, can we see the poll up on the screen? Oh, there we are. Now, if you'd like to vote for or against or abstain, I'll give you, I don't know, 10 seconds or something to do that. I think this is going to be a bit of a pattern through here. It's going to be a bit of a dead time once I put up the poll. I'll try and think of something to say until Emma closes the poll and actually tells me how many people have said for or against. It says on my screen that the poll is in progress at the moment, So I guess she's waiting for the votes to come cascading in. Hopefully we won't have to rely on a electoral college or postal votes later. How are we progressing? Have we got the poll in yet? I'm not seeing it, not seeing the result of the poll yet. Right. They're still voting apparently. Ah, here it comes. There we go. We've got excellent. Thanks very much indeed. We have 91 votes in favour, and we have just 14 abstentions, and nobody against. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, I think we're getting the hang of that now. Excellent. This is going to crop up quite a lot, so I hope we can keep it as smooth as we possibly can. Thanks very much indeed. Now what I want to do, item 2 on the agenda, is the Chair's report. We've got a couple of things like this. What we've done here is actually pre-record a presentation by Sean Ashworth, who is our chairman. So I hope now we'll be able to call up the pre-recorded video from Sean Ashworth. Can we see if we can get that up, please? Looks like it's working.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being at this year's AGM of Sussex Wildlife Trust. My name's Sean Ashworth. I'm the Chair of Trustees for Sussex Wildlife Trust. My talk is going to be a very simple one, and I just want to say thank you to all the people that make what we all do possible. I want to start with you, the members. Without you and your contributions, the Wildlife Trust would simply not exist in its present form. So thank you for bearing with us through this difficult time. Of course, the majority of the hands-on work is done by the staff. So a big thank you to the staff team for everything they've done to make everything possible. A group of volunteers, trustees that set the strategic direction for the Wildlife Trust. Here they all are. So I want to say thank you to my fellow trustees for all the efforts that they've put in. The wider group of volunteers, thank you to all of you guys, without who much of the work that we do wouldn't be possible. It's a huge workforce dedicated to the protection of wildlife in Sussex. And here's a good example of them having a nice cup of tea at the new Horsebox Cafe. I also want to thank our president, Tony Whitbread, for championing wildlife in Sussex in the year of this report, as well as through the many years of his great career. So thank you, Tony. And of course, we have a good number of partners that work with us on project after project and work stream after work stream. This includes the councils, schools, catchment partnerships, other government agencies, and other environmental NGOs and charities. So thank you to all our partners. And last but not least, I want to say thank you to the wildlife of Sussex. And here's an example of a group of wild animals roaming about the countryside. So thank you to the wildlife of Sussex. And I will pass on now to the next speaker.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Sean. That was a good run through, and yes, of course, I second all the thanks to the staff and the volunteers who've made this all possible. What I'd like to do now, that's the first item, or the second item rather. What I'd like to do now is move over to the item 3, which is about the accounts. I've had a note that so that you may be having a few technical problems and not necessarily being able to see all the panelists. I'm not sure whether we can cure that. Apparently some of you unlucky people can only see me, but never mind, we'll move on if we can. I can see all the panelists here, so it seems to be working on some screens, but not all. However, let's move on. I'd like to now introduce Linda Clark to talk about the accounts. And again, we have a pre-recorded video from Linda.
Good morning, and I would like to add my welcome to those from Tony and Sean. As your Honorary Treasurer, it gives me pleasure to present the 2020 annual accounts to you, our members. Here is shown the headline financial results for the year compared to last year's results. Total income was £5.5 million. This is approximately £100,000 less than last year's income of £5.6 million. Member-related income of £3.1 million was 26% less than the previous year's amount of £4.1 million. The reduction in member income was in the main offset by the 26% increase in charitable activity income, up from £1.4 million last year to £2.3 million this year. Total expenditure of £4.6 million was 16% higher than last year's amount of £3.9 million. Expenditure on fundraising and member support activities of £1.3 million was 11% higher than last year. Charitable activity spending of £3.2 million was 18% higher than last year. Net income was £906,000 for the year, which was £800,000 less than last year. The key areas of change in this year's results compared to last year are: legacy income was approximately £1 million less than last year, but still a very significant amount of £500,000. Public appeal income was £325,000 more than last year, specifically in response to the appeal for the Harbour Discovery Centre project. Donation income was about £550,000 less than last year, again mainly as a result of the significant donations for the Harbour project received last year. Additional unrestricted expenditure of about £550,000 was made this year, mainly on staff and infrastructure costs. The total income of £5.5 million for the year is slightly less than the previous year's £5.6 million. Over the past 10 years, income has grown from £3 million to £5.5 million, an increase of just over 80%. This year, 50% of the income, £3 million, was unrestricted. The remaining £2.5 million, 45% of our total, was specifically for restricted projects. The most significant of these projects funded this year, not unsurprisingly, was the Harbour Discovery Centre, which received £1.6 million of income. As a membership organisation, it is not surprising that over 50% of our income arises from membership fees and donations, the blue aspect on these bars. Here we see over the past 5 years the fluctuation in member and charitable activity income. Member-related income, which includes legacy income, has risen over the 5 years from £2.7 million to £3.1 million. Of special note is the increase in membership fees and donations from £1.2 million to £1.6 million. Over the same period, charitable activity income has increased from £1.4 million to £2.3 million. The significant growth has been in the funding for nature reserve management, again largely related to the Harbour Discovery Centre project. £1.4 million of the 2020 amount, which has been provided by land management and stewardship grants. The breakdown of the £3.1 million donation and membership income by main source is shown in this pie chart. 54% of the amount, being £1.6 million, has come from member income. Legacy income of £514,000. Fundraising, including public appeals, totaled £508,000, with specific donations making up £421,000. The previous slides have highlighted the importance of membership income to our finances. We ended the year with 35,163 members from 19,783 households. This is a net increase in member numbers of 3.4% during the year. One of our strategic goals is to achieve member numbers which equal 3% of the population of Sussex. We ended the year with member numbers equaling 2.4% of the Sussex population, up from last year's 2.1%. Since 2016, we have increased the investment in membership recruitment, which has risen fourfold during the period, and our diverse recruitment methods are continuing to yield good results. Charitable activity income in 2020 totaled 2.3 million, with the largest portion of 1.4 million for nature reserves management, which amounted to 63% of the total. Income from people and wildlife activities, the next largest slice at £483,000. The Sussex Biodiversity Record Centre attracted £226,000 of funding, and wildlife and conservation activities received £154,000 of income. Shifting the focus now to expenditure, the total for 2020 was 4.6 million. Half of this amount was spent in the areas of raising funds and nature reserve management, where spend was 1.3 million in each area. This was closely followed by spend in working with people of 1.1 million. £426,000 was spent on wildlife conservation, and the Biodiversity Record Centre spend totaled £351,000. Expenditure has increased over the past 3 years from 3.4 million to 4.6 million. The areas where the increases have been most significant are working with people. As the people-focused aspect of our work, staff costs and the associated project and education costs have seen noticeable increases. Raising funds. A strategic focus on increasing recruitment of new members to grow the total membership base has been the cause of most of the increased spend in this area. Nature reserves management. Increased expenditure has arisen in the cost of land management and the associated vehicle and equipment costs. It is fair to say that in the past 3 years, we have invested significantly in staff, where average full-time equivalent roles have risen from 58 to 71. And as a consequence, total staff costs have risen at £350,000 over the 3 years. Turning to the balance sheet, total funds have increased from 10.4 million last year to 11.3 million this year. A substantial element of the increase has come from the significant building construction at Harbour, which at the year end is reflected in the accounts at a value of 3.3 million. So to summarise, the 2019-20 financial year has been another year of significant achievements. We ended the year with a record number of members, 35,163, a milestone we should all be proud of. Your commitment to and investment in the Trust is necessary for our continued work, and we owe you all a big thank you. After many years in the planning and preparation, this is the year we saw the Harbour Discovery Centre substantially structurally completed, and we are looking forward to finishing the construction and opening the centre. We have also made investment in staff and operational support systems to strengthen the organisation and provide a sustainable platform for our future work to protect the wildlife of Sussex.
Thank you very much, Linda. Well, those of you who remember me working at the Trust will realise that finance is not my strong point, but that actually looked a pretty amazing set of figures for what is actually an incredibly challenging year. So thank you very much to Linda and everybody else who's been involved in all of this. What I'd like to do now is we'll put the adoption of the accounts to the vote, and then we're going to move on to item 4, where we'll bring up some, we'll bring up any questions if they come up. So can I ask you to vote now for whether you would like to adopt, whether you're in favour, against, or wish to abstain for the adoption of the accounts? And again, I'll give you a few minutes to actually vote. It says poll in progress on my screen. I should be doing something now, shouldn't I? Cracking jokes or something, I don't know. I think in real life it's a bit different and you can actually fill in the gaps, but I'll just wait for that voting in progress to go forward. And if you have any questions you'd like to ask, again, go to the question and the Q&A function at the top of the bottom or the bottom of your screen, and we'll see if there's any questions. I'm not sure we actually have any questions yet, but we'll see. How's the poll going? I'm trying to watch two computers to make sure I'm keeping up to date with everything. Here we go. Excellent. We have 113 people in favour and 1 abstention. Well, thank you very much indeed, everyone, and no against. We'll add in, of course, we'll add in the proxy votes, which don't alter the outcome, I have to say. And in every case, we'll be adding in the proxy votes before they go onto the website. Great. So thank you very much, everybody, for that. What I'd like to go on to now, item 4, is to approve the report, the trustees' annual report to council. Before then, though, I'd like to see if there are any questions that anybody has had to go to either Sean or Linda. Has anything come through? I'm looking at two computers to see if I can catch up with any emails. No. It doesn't look like we have anything. Hang on, I'll check my other system here. Now, I think actually most of the questions we're going to be having are going to be coming up under the more general discussion right at the end, but I don't think we have any questions in relation to the accounts or to the trustees' report. In which case, I'd like to put the acceptance of the trustees. I've just remembered, I forgot 2 things. First of all, we should have recorded the proposer and the seconder for the adoption of the accounts. The proposer, of course, was Linda Clark, and the seconder was Nick Pasrika. So I forgot the proposer and seconder. Apologies for that, terrible chairing. Moving on to the report of council, we don't seem to have had any questions. So the adoption of the report has been proposed by Amanda Reeves and seconded by Emma Forward. So can we put that to the vote as well, please? The adoption of the trustees' annual report. Excellent. So again, if you could tap in whether you're for, whether you're against, or whether you wish to abstain, that would be great. Again, the poll is in progress. I think somebody suggested once we should have the countdown music until the poll ends. And we'll see if people are generally happy with the report to council. By the way, all this stuff covers the year up to the end of March 2019. 2020, isn't it? March 19 to March 2020. I think that's what it covers. How are we doing? Excellent. We have 97 votes for and 6 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Right. Well, moving on. Where are we now on the agenda? We'll launch the poll. Right, now we have a bit an item which will take a little while. We have to go through each of these individually. It's the election of directors or trustees, depending on which language you'd like to use. So we have 3 proposals for new directors who are not part of the trustee team yet, and 3 proposals for re-election. I think the information for all of these has been presented on the website and in the pack you will have received. So what I'd like to do now is go through the 3 new members. They are John Cooper, Martin Kind, and Helen Marshall. So John Cooper first. The election of John Cooper is proposed by Maria Johnston and seconded by Steve Webster. Can we have the poll up, please? That was quick. Oh, we're getting slick at this, aren't we? If you could tap the relevant button, please, and we'll see how it's poll in progress. have we elected John Cooper? Hope so. We used to have somebody else called John Cooper a long time ago, but I think it's a different John Cooper. Coming up now, yes, of course, we've got 94 votes in favour and 11 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. Good, good. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is Martin Kind. I do apologise if I've pronounced your name wrong. So Martin Kind, all those in favour of electing Martin as director, those against and any abstentions, if you could put your tick in the appropriate box, and we'll see if it comes up. I'm quite pleased this is working rather well, isn't it? I thought we'd be in far more chaos by now. Not because of the supporters I'm getting, but because of I'll be tripping over what I'm supposed to be doing. Great, how are we doing? How's the poll doing now? Have we? It's coming up now. There we go. We've got 98 in favour and just 9 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to Helen Marshall. She has been proposed by, which way up are we? Yeah, proposed by Linda Clark and seconded by Renzo Spino. So votes in favour of Helen Marshall, those against and those wishing to abstain, please. Making sure I've got this in the right order. Where are we now? So that's Helen Marshall. I'll leave the poll up for a bit longer so you can see what it actually says. Right, how are we doing? Right, apparently we're getting 75 or 80% of the people voting, so maybe some people don't feel confident enough to press the buttons. Have a go if you feel like it. We've got a poll up now, and as you can see, we have 100 voters in favour and just 7 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. Now that was Helen Marshall, so she's duly elected. Making sure I don't trip over myself again. Now what we're doing is moving on to the election of re-election of people who are putting themselves forward for re-election. Now we've got 3 directors, and as you may remember from our articles that our term of office is 3 years. So every 3 years, people have to put themselves up for re-election just to make sure we're all still happy with them. Right, okay. Yes, if you're voting, just make sure you press the submit button afterwards to make sure that your votes actually go through, just in case anybody's not doing that. Okay, excellent. Now we have got 3 people putting themselves up for re-election: Mike King, Simon Linnington, and Emma Montlake. So first of all, can I have votes please for, first of all, Mike King. The proposer is Jess Price and the seconder is Alan Stewart. Can we have votes please for Mike King? Those who would like to re-elect him, and those who are against, and those in favour. And as I say, tick the button and press submit afterwards to make sure your vote goes through. Excellent. Because all these people are already known to us and have already contributed massive amounts to the trust. So thank you to them for putting themselves forward for re-election. How are we doing? Keep talking while the poll comes in. Oh, is it coming? It's come up. Excellent. Right, 106 people in favour, 5 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. So that's Mike King is duly elected. Moving on to Simon Linnington, has put himself up for re-election, our honorary secretary at the moment. So can we have votes? He's been proposed by Richard Black and seconded by Barry Yates. So can we have votes in favour of re-electing Simon Linnington? Any against and any abstentions, please? Great. We're almost getting slick at this now, aren't we? It's funny, I can see the other panelists on my screen and they all look so serious. Great. How's the poll doing? Right, 110 in favour and just 3 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. Right, and moving on to the last person putting themselves up for re-election, and that's Emma Montlake. So she's been proposed by Claire Blencowe and seconded by Emma Ford. So please, as before, can we have votes in favour of re-electing Emma, any against, and any abstentions, please? And again, don't forget to press your submit button afterwards to make sure it goes through. Great. I think that participation is working very well. I must say, when I'm looking around, I think some people's backgrounds are really nice. I quite like where Linda is sitting. I think that might have been taken from one of our nature reserves, mustn't it? Excellent. Great, here we are. We've got the poll back now. We've got 109 people for and just 3 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks very much, everybody, for participating with that. That actually went really well. I think we went through that very, very smoothly. Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And for those that were able to participate. Excellent. So we've now got 3 new trustees and 3 re-elected existing trustees. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, hang on, I've dropped something. There we go. The next 2 items, we'll run them together. The next 2 items on the agenda are about the auditors. So reappointing the auditors. This is to ask for approval to reappoint RSM UK Audit as our auditors for the ensuing year. Can we have, that's been proposed by Linda Clark and seconded by Nick Pasrica. So please can we have your votes in favour, any against, and any abstentions, please? Good. I think we're just got 1 or 2 polls left. We're actually getting to the end of this. How are we doing? I think we're going ahead remarkably quickly. We planned about an hour for this, and it looks like we'll be done in about 3/4 of an hour. So we're doing very well indeed. How's the poll doing? There we go. Those in favour, 109, only 2 abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. And I think the last thing on my agenda requiring a vote is simply to authorise council to fix remuneration for the auditors, to pay them, in other words. They like that. This has been proposed by Linda Clark and seconded by Nick Pasrica. So can I have your votes, please, in favour of that, any against, and any abstentions? Very good, very good. I think, looking down my notes, I think this is the last of our polls, and we've got 100% in favour there. So 111 people voting in favour, none against, and no abstentions. And as with all these polls, we'll be adding these up to the proxy votes, which again they reflect exactly what we've seen here anyway. So it's not going to change anything. Right, I think that is about all we need to do with the auditors. I think that's checking on my other computer. I think actually we're okay for most of the items now on the AGM. I would just like to finish the AGM part of the meeting before I hand over to Tor. We've had a note from Peter Williams, who last year he stood up and issued a vote of thanks for the staff and volunteers. He made a very deliberate effort to make sure that from the floor there was a vote of thanks from the audience, and he's done the same again this year. He sent a very nice email, and I'd just like to read out what he says, because it reflects exactly what I'm thinking as well. It's been an incredibly difficult year, and I think what the staff and volunteers have done there is incredible. So he said just literally that. It's been a difficult time for everybody, but the Sussex Wildlife Trust has done so much and deserves to be applauded. So thank you very much for saying that, Peter Williams. I'm sure it's in everybody's mind, and I'd like to second that. Thank you very much indeed for everybody who works at the Trust. It's always been good to go to the Trust and not know the difference between a volunteer and a member of staff. I think that's a sign of great health. But the work that's been done this year has been quite outstanding because of the difficult circumstances that they've been in. And of course, I left 2 years ago as Chief Executive. I'm just glad there's a different Chief Executive to seeing people through this very difficult time. I don't know whether I'd have been able to handle it anywhere near as well. So thank you very much for Tor, for actually leading the Trust through this very difficult time very effectively. So what I'd like to do now, I think I've covered everything. I'm sure somebody will shout at me if I haven't. This closes the official part of the meeting. And what I'd like to do now is hand over to Tor, probably a physical tour, but also a pre-recorded tour, who I think has also done a pre-recorded video to now play to us. So that's the end of the official meeting. And thank you very much. Thank you for your participation, and thanks for bearing with us on those polls. Worked quite well, didn't it? Can I now hand over to Tor? And I think she's going to share screen and give us a bit of a talk. Who's going to share whose screen?
Good morning and welcome. Thank you for the continued support that you give to the Trust in so many ways. Your support has been particularly important over the last 8 months. And all our member events have stopped. We are still supported now by 34,200 members. This is outstanding. Some of you have been members for 10, 20, 30 years, some of you since the very beginning. You've clearly not let the small matter of a global pandemic get in the way of your commitment to wildlife in Sussex. Thank you. The Trust is in good heart because of you. We live in a world full of challenges and concerns: the ecological crisis, the climate crisis, the pandemic, frightening levels of proposed housing development, road building proposals, diversity and inclusion challenges, and the vast numbers of people needing the countryside and impacting on wildlife. Some days I have a degree of overwhelm, as it feels as if Sussex Wildlife Trust is being asked to come up with all the answers to all of these challenges at once, to all of the audiences in Sussex. But we keep a calm head and continue to champion wildlife in Sussex as we have done for 6 decades, driving forward our work to improve habitats and find innovative solutions to the challenges facing wildlife in this county. Butcherlands, part of our reserve at Ebenow, is one of the first examples of rewilding, of regenerating cultivated farmland into a thriving ecosystem. This land was purchased 20 years ago by the Trust with your support, and it now supports a thriving tapestry of habitats. And of course, rewilding is now a topic which makes national headlines. We are also proud to have supported NEP since the very start of their rewilding journey, and are delighted that rewilding is now part of the global conservation agenda. The need for creating climate resilient landscapes is also making the headlines, and yet our Sussex Flow initiative has been in place for 10 years doing exactly that, using natural solutions to address some of the problems we face today. We continue to advocate for the restoration of natural processes wherever we can, from the naturalisation of rivers and streams, the reintroduction of beavers, or the restoration of grazing to ungrazed systems. Nature knows best, and we continue to find the balance between management of sites and rewilding. These are just some examples of our pioneering work over the years, and I can assure you, we did not slow down between April 2019 and March 2020. We have some of the finest reserves for wildlife in Sussex, and we continue to deliver a programme of habitat improvements and grazing, and recorded over 10,000 species within them. We continue to host the Sussex Biodiversity Records Centre, which now holds an impressive 7,677,730 records, and the critical Sussex Local Wildlife Sites Initiative, which is working hard to ensure our 600 plus local wildlife sites are in better condition. We provided land management advice to farmers and landowners on more than 20,000 acres, with a focus on creating climate resilient landscapes. The Sussex Flow Initiative has just won silver in the CPRE Sussex Awards. Until March 2020, we continued to lead a range of activities, walks, events and field trips for TOTS, primary and secondary school children, students and adults. We delivered training for teachers in Forest School and Wild Beach. Since March, we have created a wide range of online resources for different audiences. In March 2020, we heard we were successful with funding from the lottery for a 3-year project, Wild Coast Sussex, which will deliver a range of work, activities and engagement along the Sussex coast. Thank you for your responses to our survey, as your feedback helped enable this success. One pioneering aspect of this project is to bring ghost gear, discarded fishing gear, out of our Sussex seas, and to work with the local fishing communities to try and get fishing gear into recycling schemes, as the only option until now has been landfill. We pushed and promoted the Help Our Kelp campaign with a wonderful film produced by Big Wave Productions and narrated by Sir David Attenborough. This will be the largest rewilding project in the southeast and has generated huge interest. Should the bylaw be signed, this will see 304 square kilometres of Sussex inshore seabed protected from trawling and natural regeneration of marine habitats enabled. We signed a 5-year partnership with Horsham District Council, the Wilder Horsham District Project. This is a pioneering partnership with a local authority, watched with interest by other wildlife trusts and local authorities. Over the next 5 years, we will be working with landowners and community groups throughout the district to develop a nature recovery network. We also retain our independence and will of course challenge Horsham District Council if we do not agree with their decisions. We held a landscape innovation conference with over 300 delegates. The passion for shared working on climate and ecological issues was inspiring, and the event helped link people and ideas for the future. The Rye Harbour Discovery Centre building is complete and the services are currently being connected to the mains in the village. We plan to open in late spring 2021, COVID restrictions allowing. This wonderful building has been the single biggest project in the history of the Trust and has created a range of challenges and opportunities. Thank you for your patience and support. Thank you to the Friends of Rye Harbour Nature Reserve for your ongoing support to the Trust, and thank you to all the funders, including the lottery. I hope you will join us for a well-earned coffee and view when we open. Thank you to all of you who volunteer. In 2019 to 20, we had just under 19,000 hours of your time. We couldn't do what we do without you. In particular, our volunteer lookers have proved to be a critical part of our operation this year. We know that some of you are determined to keep doing practical volunteering, but we have to follow government guidelines and we have to keep you safe. You matter. We've still got a big job to do going forward. Your support in numbers gives us strength and courage to speak up against proposals which would irreversibly damage wildlife. Your financial help matters. We hope to make 2 woodland purchases in 2021, Willand Wood and Streels Lane, in total an additional 60 acres of mixed woodland adjacent to beloved Ebeno. Your messages give a real lift to our working days in these difficult times. Here's one of my recent favourites. In this time of such negative news and press, there can seldom have been such a positive report. So thanks to all who contribute such good work to the preservation and development of the ecology of Sussex. You can be proud, and we know that you are. Your support is vital to our work in Sussex, and quite simply, we could not do what we do without you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much indeed, Tor. That's a really, yeah, it shows a fantastic record of success in what cannot have been an easy year. So yes, once again, well done, everybody. Great stuff. We'll have some, I think we may have some questions later on, but what I'd like to do now is to move on to Michael Blencowe's talk, 100 Days of Wildlife in Lockdown. I think a lot of people have been keeping up with Michael's blogs through lockdown. I think a lot of us, myself included, we did I think he did a garden bird race every Sunday. I remember doing that. That was great fun, and getting most of my neighbours involved as well. So I think that was quite a thing to do through the lockdown. But if we can now pass over to Michael Blencowe, perhaps we can see his pre-recorded presentation. And he says if nothing works at all, he can do it live. But I think actually, let's see if we can call that up. Excellent. Thank you very much.
I think it's working. It's working.
Yeah, it's
well,
working.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to you. I was about to say it's lovely to see you all, but unfortunately, I can't see you. Although it's probably fortunate you can't see me because I haven't actually got dressed yet this morning. Anyway, I came to talk to you all, of course, only a year ago at the AGM down there in Shoreham. There we all are there, look, 2019. If you had told me then that I'll be talking to you again in 2020 without my trousers on, then I thought you were crazy, but that's what's happened. There we are, 12 months ago. That's probably illegal now, isn't it? We probably get arrested for that sort of behavior now. There's not one bit of social distancing there in the room. Here's a photo of me with Jamie Burston. And Jamie won he's the young naturalist who won the David Streeter Award last year. Look at me, I've got my arm around him. I haven't hugged anybody for about 12 months. And there's, I feel a bit uncomfortable with this picture, a bit uncomfortable. So I can probably, that's better. That's much safer. There you are. So 2019, well, it seems a world away, doesn't it, folks? It does seem a different world. Of course, we had it into 2020, and this year I had loads of exciting plans. This year I was hoping to go to Thailand to see my friend Nat over in Thailand and look for the rufous-necked hornbill. And I booked to go to Estonia to look for the Siberian flying squirrel. Well, like most of my plans for 2020, they've all ended up in the bin. And of course, I had lots of other plans involving you this year. We hope to take you out, leading you on walks around the wildlife trusts, fantastic nature reserves, courses, all sorts of things. But in March, the lockdown happened and I packed up my desk and headed home. There would be no Thai jungles or Estonian forests. In fact, there wasn't much South Downs or West Weald woodlands, to be honest. I spent most of the last 8 months sort of trapped here in this bungalow in the centre of Sussex. Now, I did prepare, of course, for the lockdown. I did a little bit of panic buying. I did buy a huge sack of black beans, and I bought a reasonable amount of toilet paper to see me through the first few weeks of lockdown. And of course, I had my standard lockdown haircut. I shaved all my hair off to prepare myself for the pandemic. And here's my little bungalow, my bungalow bunker. This is where I was for most of the lockdown and most of 2020. We moved here about 8 years ago. About 2012, we moved here. It's only a small bungalow. We got a few lawns on the front there, a few patches of grass at the front. The back garden's about 12 meters by 12 meters. It came with some very strange features. You can see lots of patio there, lots of very boring ornamental sort of flowers and planting, and a very dull lawn. Also some very weird things. It came with this very weird statue of a pig, which makes me feel very uncomfortable. But even stranger was this statue of Ian Botham, which is still sat in the garden. So it was a very old-fashioned bungalow. It's something from the 60s, really. It's even called Woodstock. But the whole interior and the outdoors was all sort of set from a different era. Now, there was a time, of course, there was a time when these sort of things were acceptable, having nice mown lawns and boring ornamental flower beds and patios. But of course, times have changed. Now, these days, our planet is in trouble, and lots of wildlife, even our local wildlife, needs all the help we can give it. And so when we moved in, we made a few improvements. We got rid of the lawns and the paving slabs and those awful flower beds and the ugly fences. And we put in some wildflowers, dug a small pond, put some native hedges in, and planted a few little trees. And so what I found was that what I didn't know, I guess, back in 2012, was all these improvements would make my garden pandemic proof. Because in 2020, when lockdown struck, my garden was so full of wildlife that I was guaranteed never to be bored. So I gathered up some of my wildlife watching equipment and I ventured out of my patio doors to explore a whole new world, my back garden. What I thought I'd do is I'd write down some of my sightings in a daily online diary to share them with Wildlife Trust members in the hope that it may inspire and distract you as we headed through some of the dark days that lied ahead. Now, I only thought it would last for a few weeks, and of course, it went on for a lot longer than I had planned. Now, one of my first diary entries wasn't a sighting, it was more of a sound, a very thin whistle coming from high above the silent streets, transmitting from somewhere amongst the stars and the satellites, somewhere between Sussex and Alpha Centauri. It was the sound of the redwing. Now, what I heard on those early March days, play this noise. Hear that noise? A very thin whistle. Lovely flight call of the redwing. Now, these birds were migrating back from their winter in Sussex. They would have been pushed down here by the cold weather, Scandinavia and the far north. They would have come down here to spend the winter, and in March I was hearing them returning back to their homes in the north. I also found some wildlife inside the house itself. I found these peacock butterflies emerging from their winter hibernation, trapped inside my garage. And being trapped inside was a feeling that I could certainly relate to back in March. I took them out into the garden in the sunshine, and I released them and watched them fly high and away from the garden, with a little bit of jealousy, I must admit. And in the start of the lockdown, my hedge started to burst into life. The catkins there on the hazel. And through the year, the blackthorn came into bloom. The gorgeous hawthorn too, providing an important nectar source, important food for insects, and a home, of course, for lots of wildlife, birds and other animals. And speaking of a home for wildlife, I tried to help some of the local birds in my neighbourhood by lining their nests by making this hare feeder. I'm not sure, well, it's not really a feeder so much, but the idea was I thought this, my lovely Sean Locks would actually be lining a nest for a long-tailed tit or some local birds. And I watched it for quite a while. No birds took advantage of my cut hair. Maybe it's my shampoo, maybe it's too much Timotei or something, I'm not too sure. But I kind of had a lovely idea that there'd be a family long-tailed tit snuggled up in my hair, but it never really happened. Now, come the spring, we heard some of the first bird song. Of course, one of the first bird sounds we hear in the spring is that rather dull, but it's a lovely call of the chiff-chaff. It's a bit repetitive, but it was always lovely to hear the first chiff-chaff of the year. There's one singing there in the back garden. It was shortly followed by the first blackcaps who have been returning from the south after their winter holidays. They were reappearing in Sussex, and their lovely warbles were heard in the sallow tree at the back there. I'm not sure whether it was the lack of traffic or the lack of planes or just the lack of background noise in general, or maybe it was the fact that I was more desperate this year to hear some birdsong. But for some reason, the birdsong did seem much more intense in the spring. Now, looking at some other spring wildlife, I started seeing some of my favourite spring insects. We have bee flies in the garden, but I was surprised to find a dotted bee fly. This is a bee fly I tend to find on the downs more than I do elsewhere, and so I was surprised and delighted to find it in my back garden. I was also thrilled, of course, to find the orange-tip butterfly. Now, orange-tip butterflies are my first sign of spring, and usually I see them as I'm racing across Sussex in my car and then flying along the roadside hedges. But this year I had to wait until orange-tip came to see me, and I was pleased in April to see my first orange-tip fluttering around in the back garden. And to help butterflies, I've planted quite a few trees and plants to encourage them. Here's an older buckthorn bush, which is the food plant for the caterpillars of the brimstone butterfly. And I was really pleased this year to see a brimstone flying around the older buckthorn. So I grabbed my camera and got a few photos of her as she was laying her eggs. You can see she's curled her abdomen there. She's putting a little egg on the underside of the buckthorn leaf. As she's flying away, I got in close to see a little tiny skittle-shaped egg on the underside of the leaves. I was really pleased with that. Now, I was, of course, planning to be elsewhere in April. I was hoping to be snorkeling around some coral reef in the tropical seas off Western Thailand or something, but that wasn't going to happen. It didn't stop me, though. It didn't stop me. I still got my snorkel out. I decided to go snorkeling in my pond. Now, have a cup of tea in it. Now, it wasn't as exciting as I planned, to be honest. I thought I'd see all sorts of things in the pond there, but it was actually a bit dark. It's a bit dark and horrible. To be honest, it was probably swallowing a mouthful of my pond water was probably more dangerous than contracting the COVID-19 itself. But the event, though, was immortalized by one of my readers who sent in this lovely piece of artwork. So thank you to Darren for sending that in. Now, building a pond, no matter how small, is one of the best things you can do for wildlife in your garden. And I was so glad we had dug a pond all those years ago, because in 2020, I found some amazing wildlife using that pond. Things I've never seen in the garden before. So I've never seen toads before in the garden, and spending more time this year, of course, staring at my pond, I saw quite a few of them. There's a couple of toads out there, those beautiful eyes. I do love toads' eyes. There was also some frogs. I found frogs in the pond as well, and there were newts in there too. There was also a whole range of damselflies and dragonflies. I spent quite a while laying there next to the pond, watching them mating and laying their eggs. But the real highlight of my pond for 2020, I was absolutely amazed and thrilled when I took this photograph of a grass snake hunting in my pond. Now, I love snakes, and I had no idea we had snakes in the garden. And by spending time in the garden this year, I got to see this incredible grass snake. I even built a compost heap, hopefully that they'll lay their eggs in there, and we'll have a little population of grass snakes in the back garden in the future. Gorgeous things. Now, I took up a few new hobbies in 2020. I did a bit of bird photography. I turned my sofa into a bird hide. I camouflaged myself. If you look closely, you can just about make me out. I'm just to the left of Elvis there, on the right-hand side of the sofa. Now, I'm not the best photographer. I mean, my first attempts were admittedly not great. This is a jay here, but I waited around the next day, and the jay returned. I got a picture, which I was quite happy with. It's nice to see a jay up close. Beautiful birds, of course. This one posed for me right by the back of the window there. I even found a green woodpecker hiding down the back of the sofa. There he is. Look, he come up quite close as well. Now, speaking of birds, one of my highlights of the pandemic, and there weren't many highlights in the pandemic, was the back garden bird race. Now, each Sunday, between 10 and 11, I challenged people to see how many species of bird they could see from their windows, in their gardens, or wherever they were. And there was a huge response. Loads of people got involved. So thank you to everyone who joined me. Hundreds of people got involved in the bird race. In fact, it's the most well-attended event I've ever organised, despite the fact I was sat on my own in the back garden. And at a time of isolation, it was really comforting to think of everyone in Sussex and beyond who were stood in their gardens at the exact same time, all cursing the fact that there had been a lot more birds on the bird feeder about 10 minutes before the bird race started. So whether you're in a huge garden in the centre of Sussex, whether you're in your spare room making your own little bird hide, or whether you're sat on a fire escape in Hove watching swallows migrating in off the sea, it was a great group activity at a time when there were no group activities being allowed. So thank you again for everyone who took part. We're still doing it each month now. We finished the weekly bird races, but people wanted me to continue, so we do them each month. So look online to see when the next one is. I think it's the end of November as the next one. So we even had our own marketing, had our own T-shirts, which sold really well. And there were some amazing sightings, of course. People love just watching the birds in their garden. It was a great distraction, of course, from the pandemic. We had some strange sightings. We had black kites, red kites, ospreys, cuckoos, ring ouzels. Even had an escaped rhea wandering around in someone's back garden. One of my favorite sightings was, of course, a hoopoe. Now, we didn't see one in the garden. There were plenty of hoopoe around Sussex being seen, and we hoped we'd see one, or somebody would see one on the bird race. And so in April, we changed the rules of the bird race to contain a new hoopoe loophole. I've got to be careful how I say that. But if you saw a hoopoe in your garden, you won the bird race instantly. Unfortunately, as I say, no one did see a hoopoe in their garden, even though some people did try and convince me they had seen a hoopoe in their garden. They didn't fool me. They weren't fooling me. But we did have some amazing sightings, though. As I mentioned, some people were joining the bird race from beyond Sussex. We had Tom, who was in lockdown himself over in New Zealand, who are 12 hours ahead of us. So he did the bird race between 10 and 11 at night over in New Zealand. He didn't see many birds at that time of night, but there was one bird he was looking for. And about 11:15, just before the end of the race, while we were all sat here in Sussex watching our blackbirds and dunnocks in the garden, Tom watched a little bird waddling off the sea into his garden. A little penguin. So it was good to see a penguin on the bird list for that week. Now, one of the best things I did when we moved into this house many years ago was hire a stripper, this turf stripper, in fact. Now, we hired it for a weekend and we got to work creating a wildflower meadow. Now, our garden was quite well established. It was very nutrient rich, so we had to remove that top layer of turf. So we stripped the turf, and I must confess, it looked pretty bleak. It did look pretty bleak for that weekend. I could hear the house prices dropping in the street that weekend, but we tidied it up. We made it look nice, and we sowed some native wildflower seeds. And the following spring, it looked blooming lovely. It looked fantastic that first spring, and since then, it has been an endless source of pleasure and fascination for me. Lots of insects, lots of butterflies, bees, all sorts in there, and lots of lovely flowers. It seems to change its sort of structure every year. This year was a very good year for cowslips. In the spring, we watched quite a few of those coming up from the front lawn. And the start of 2020 looked like this, but as we headed into May and June, it looked absolutely gorgeous. It really was full of life. We had marble whites there this year, lots of 6-spot burnet moths, hoverflies, bees, beetles, bumblebees, bugs. Sometimes it takes me about half an hour to walk from the house just down that very short path there because I'm so distracted by some of the activity and the wonderful things you can see in the wildflower lawn there. So it's a short little clip now. You may not better hear this, but if you get down on your hands and knees in my lawn, the amount of buzzing, the amount of activity down there is just beautiful. And it was great to see that so many people actually have been inspired to do this. It's really something worth doing. It doesn't need to be the whole lawn, just a small patch of your lawn. You could turn it into a little bit of a wildflower meadow, and it's certainly a great thing to do for wildlife. And the back garden too. There's the back garden at the start of lockdown, but by June it was looking absolutely lovely. We sit in those deck chairs there, watching the marble whites chasing each other around the meadow. Beautiful. Now, lots of insects in the garden in the daytime, but of course, I'm always keen to find out what I could see in the evening. And I got the old moth trap out many times throughout the year. I made quite a few videos to put online of me doing some moth trapping. Had some lovely moths, of course. Some of my favourites were there. But I was really pleased to find one particular moth. This little chap here, the beautiful pearl, a real rarity in Sussex. I've never seen one before. I've never even heard of it, to be honest, until one landed in the trap. I was really pleased to find that one in the moth trap. But for some people, these were the highlights of my my moth trapping. I had a great abundance of maybugs, cockchafers. Now, I've got to admit, I do love maybugs. They are crazy looking things. And we put a few videos up, which were very popular on social media, of these guys waggling their antennae and taking flight. Days off. There he goes. Now, the other things, of course, were passing through my garden at night, and so to do some more investigating, I got my one of these night vision cameras, a trail camera. I tied it to something in the garden. There we are. I strapped it to old Ian Botham there, and I put some food down to see what was walking around my garden at night. And the first night we did that, we got lovely photographs of this beautiful vixen, a female fox there, and I wondered if she had a family somewhere in the neighbourhood. Well, of course, I was very, very delighted to find that she lived not too far away at all. Now, here's my fridge in my kitchen, and let's play this. You can see how close the fox's den was. There's my kitchen. You go through, look over the kitchen wall there, over the garden wall. And there are the fox cubs. They were totally oblivious to me watching them, and I spent many evenings just staring over the garden wall there, seeing some incredible activity just a few feet below me. But one of the most exciting things I found in 2020 was this on just next to my front lawn. It's some hedgehog poo. And all the years I've lived here, I've never seen a hedgehog in the cul-de-sac. So I was thrilled to see some hedgehog poo. And what I thought I'd do is try and get some evidence of the hedgehog itself. Now, the poo was pretty strong evidence there's a hedgehog there, but for all these years, for many years, I've been using these hedgehog tunnels, footprint tunnels, all across Sussex to try and survey for hedgehogs. Now, the idea is it's a tunnel with a little board there you put inside with two bits of blank A4 paper on either end. And you get some bait to lure the hedgehog in. Now, hedgehogs love hot dogs. You can blame them. They're darn tasty, those hedgehogs. Hot dogs, not hedgehogs. Those hot dogs are darn tasty. Now, you put those hot dogs, or what's left of them, on the little dish there. And then there they go, look. Lovely. And then you use some non-toxic oil-based, vegetable oil-based sort of paint, and make a little ink pad, as it were, next to those white sheets. Now, the idea is the hedgehog's going to run in to get those hot dogs. They're going to get their feet dirty on the black stuff there. Now, when they run out, their little footprints will be evidence that you've got a hedgehog in the area. Now, the amazing thing is I've been doing this for about 6 years now, all across Sussex, and it's never worked once. So I resorted back to using the old trail camera again, and I was absolutely delighted to get footage of a hedgehog and some footage here of a hedgehog tunnel not working. So here we go. Let's press play here. Let's see if we can get this to work. There we go. Walks past. She smells the hot dog. Runs straight past the tunnel there. In fact, if we play that again, you can actually hear her sniggering as she looks in the tunnel and blatantly ignores it. Listen closely. And there were even more surprises, which I just couldn't even imagine. Now, I was sat in the front garden one night looking at some moths, and I noticed a bat had flown out of my neighbour's house from underneath those tiles there. A little bat flew, a little pipistrelle, a common pipistrelle. And I wondered if there were any more bats who were using those tiles during the daytime. So the following evening, I got my bat detector out and my one of those handheld sort of tally counters and a big glass of red wine. And I sat there on a deck chair and I watched my neighbour's roof and I counted the bats as they came out. Now, amazingly, there were 126 bats using my neighbour's bungalow during the day. I had no idea there was a bat roost so close to the house, and even some of my neighbours had 50 bats in their roof. We counted all the bats. There's well over 200, heading towards 300 bats using my cul-de-sac. Absolutely incredible. In the mornings, about 4:30, they would come back in the morning. I set my alarm. I go and sit on the grass, not with a glass of wine, but I could sit on the grass at 4 o'clock in the morning and watch the bats whirling around as they returned. A really impressive spectacle. This is the kind of thing I traveled to see. But here it was happening right next to me in my little cul-de-sac. An amazing sight. So we went through 100 days all the way to June the 25th. I made it through. I thought I was struggling a bit by day 72, but we kept on going. But to be honest, there was so much wildlife in the garden. It was an endless source of inspiration and a great distraction for me during the lockdown. It's been a really tough year, of course, but for me, the 2020 pandemic has highlighted the important role that nature plays in our lives, and certainly the important role we have to help nature, whether it's improving our gardens or supporting Sussex Wildlife Trust. And it was so great to know that so many people were enjoying the diary as well. I had some lovely messages and all throughout the 100-day diary. And when we finished on day 100, I had loads of comments. So it was really nice to know that the diary had meant a lot to so many people and helped quite a lot of people get through those challenging days earlier this year. And, you know, it's really made me think about the importance of gardens and our local areas for wildlife. And here's my bungalow here. It just made me think that if we all made some small improvements just to our gardens and to our local areas, it could make a huge difference to our communities, to Sussex, to Britain, and to the world as well. And so here we are. We're back in lockdown too. I'm still stuck here in my cul-de-sac, and I was out in the streets just last night, wandering around again in my dressing gown, and I heard this sound high above me. It was the sound of the redwing. And they're returning now. They've been all spring and summer. They've been up there in Scandinavia. They've been up there. Doing their bit, breeding up there, nesting, raising a family in the far north. And now it's getting cold up there. They're being pushed back down again. And I'm hearing them returning to Sussex. So I heard them left and I heard them come back. And in between that, I haven't really been very far at all. So thank you for listening. And thank you again for all your support. And for those of you who joined the bird race and everyone's comments. And thank you for supporting the Wildlife Trust through this challenging year. And I hope I'll see you at the AGM in 2021 in my trousers, and hopefully I'll see some of you next year when things are brighter. So thank you for listening.
Wow, thanks very much indeed, Michael. Excellent, we're back on screen again. Thank you. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? I mean, when you can actually see in your own patch, I mean, it's incredible, but shouldn't be surprising, should it? Yeah, and I've noticed, I think a week or so ago, I started to hear the redwings as well. which is brilliant, isn't it? And you see things go full cycle. So thanks very much indeed, Michael, and thanks for that 100 days lockdown diary and that work you did with gardens. I know personally that some people surrounding me here down in Storrington are doing things, and I think not in small part inspired by the things you're saying. We've got a wildflower meadow forming just down the road. And I think, again, they've been inspired by what the Wildlife Trust has done. And I think there's a lot more going on that you don't hear about that has been inspired by your work. So it's absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much indeed. Great. Now we could devolve into complete chaos as I try to organise the question and answer session. I think lucky old Tor is going to answer most of them. But if I can bring up on my screen the emails I've got from the people who have been working hard behind the scenes, trying to bring together the questions that we've had. Thank you very much indeed for those questions. One or two came in advance, so we'll probably handle those first and see how we get on. First of all, there's a question from Peter Ayerst. Is essentially about Rookwood Golf Course and the plans to plant housing there, and essentially, how is our work with Horsham District Council aiming to influence what happens on the Rookwood, on the housing proposals at the Rookwood Golf Course. So can I hand over to Tor to address that one?
Thank you, Tony. So the government requires Horsham District Council to plan for at least 965 new homes each year until 2036. If the government changes the methodology as they say they will, Horsham District Council will have to plan for almost double to 1,715 homes a year. This is clearly an appalling prospect for wildlife. In order to meet the current high target, Horsham District Council put forward 9 strategic sites for consideration in their draft local plan, making it clear that a selection of these 9 sites will need to be allocated for development in the final plan. Sussex Wildlife Trust is clear that Rookwood is crucial for people and wildlife in Horsham. We have already made clear to Horsham District Council that we object to any development that damages the adjacent local nature reserve, and therefore development should not occur to the north of the site. We certainly have concerns about the southern section too. We have not yet decided our next step. If we press for Rookwood to be omitted from the local plan, this will require the sacrifice of other sites. Sussex Wildlife Trust made it clear during the draft plan consultation that the council's environmental evidence is not good enough to be able to assess the impact of developing these sites, and that we expect them to do more. When it comes to the local plan, we will need to see what evidence Horsham District Council have gathered since last consultation and take into consideration overall impacts for all of the sites. The Wilder Horsham District project came into being once the local plan process was already established and heading for its first round of consultation. We submitted extensive comments to the consultation that can be viewed on our website. We will continue to raise our concerns if we think the forthcoming consultation is not taking into account necessary information to ensure the natural environment is being properly considered. We will keep doing this at every stage of the plan process. We strongly believe that the Wilder Horsham District project will help us better influence local authorities and ensure the importance of our natural environment is embedded in all levels of future decision making.
Great, thanks very much. I've been looking down the questions to see if I can find ones that are linked so we can stay on the same subject for longer. And there's a slightly different question from our friends Roy and Pat Ticehurst, who recognise the difficulty that it is to respond to every planning application throughout Sussex. It's important, but extremely difficult. Their question is, how do we liaise with other like-minded organisations like RSPB, CPRE, National Trust, volunteer groups to kind of share the burden? And well, adding my own slight twist to that, I know we do a lot of work at a high strategic level anyway, so it's not just individual applications, which I think you've just kind of alluded to anyway, Tor. But would you like to say a little bit more about that in relation to how we work with other organisations and work at a strategic level?
So as we're not a statutory body in planning, we are not always aware of all of the planning proposals that are having a detrimental impact on wildlife. Our approach is to make contributions into the strategic planning documents that are presented by our local authorities, Yes, we link up with CPRE on these documents and others. When we do respond to specific development issues, we often work alongside local groups as well. We recently regrouped with the Sussex Ornithological Society, CPRE and RSPB to establish how we can do more through collaboration. We all want to make the shift from being reactive to a more proactive approach. So yes, we do work alongside these organisations, and in the future we will do more. We cannot respond to every planning application, and it is not our aim to, but we try to do as much as we can to empower our supporters to be confident in the planning process.
Excellent, thank you very much. And going back to the list, going back to the list I've got here, Rosemary Standen has asked a question about our photographic competition, which was excellent. I saw that as we came in earlier on. The question there is, looking at the winners, you notice that the 40% of the applicants were females, but all of the winners were men. How did that work? How come it's slightly unbalanced in terms of the outcome?
Okay, so all entries to the photo competition were anonymous when seen by the judges to keep it as fair as possible. So this ensured that the images were judged on the quality of the photo itself. Half of the judges were women. As you say, Tony, female photographers made up approximately 40% of the entries this year. In previous years, we've had a number of female finalists and winners. For example, in 2019, the top 4 photos were all taken by women. It is positive to see a year-on-year increase in participation by women photographers in our competition. Hopefully next year we can achieve a 50% participation rate by women photographers. The Trust encourages participation in wildlife photography and has featured a number of female photographers in our regular Behind the Lens blog series and on social media, including week-long Instagram takeovers.
Excellent, thank you very much. Moving on, I'd like to go on to Peter Hubbard. I don't know whether this is one you can answer actually, our friend Peter Harbour. Can you please advise when Sussex Wildlife Trust volunteers will be able to return to carry out conservation tasks? I know there's loads of keen volunteers out there. They're probably feeling a bit hard done by that. They can't actually get on with what they want to do. And I know that, you know, there's important conservation work that needs to be done. And nature doesn't always benefit by just being left alone. So conservation work is important. When can the volunteers get back on with it? Impossible question for you, Tor.
Well, I know this is a really frustrating one for people, but it is partly really out of our hands. Volunteer safety is really important to us, and we have to balance the conservation engagement plans with ensuring we follow government guidelines. In the autumn, we were back at 17 locations for volunteer groups. And obviously we have another lockdown, and during this lockdown, group volunteering is paused. And we will begin again once government guidance and safety precautions allow for it, possibly in December, but we'll have to wait and see. For all volunteer activities during the pandemic, there are clear joining instructions, safety guidelines and risk assessments. It's different for each site, so we're working with staff and volunteers to restart safely wherever it is possible.
Great, and I've just seen the next question is kind of linked to that. Catherine Cannon, who I know works for West Sussex County Council, I think, and she's asking a question about diversity, increasing diversity. Yeah, she's worried that there's actually little evidence of diversity of participation in trust activity or involvement. Is that fair? She understands it's a challenge. So she's generally interested in how we're addressing diversity issues within the trust. I mean, is there anything more you'd like to say about that?
So yes, this is obviously a big topic. We have this week appointed an equality and diversity consultant who's going to work with trustees, the senior management team and staff to establish an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy to set a clear way forward. We know there is a lot of work to do to ensure that the trust culture and services are inclusive and that the diversity of communities in Sussex are enabled to act for wildlife. We already have many examples of good practice across the trust, such as providing access for people with physical disabilities at Harbour, Woods Mill and the new Discovery Centre, or work with children from different backgrounds in schools and adults with mental health challenges. We have a range of planned activities with diverse communities through projects such as the Wild Coast Sussex project. We consciously look for images that show this, but we are limited by photographer presence, permissions to take photos and to share images, as well as the activities and communities we work with. This is a complex challenge across the country, and we're committed to addressing it.
Excellent. Great, thank you. Always a difficult one, so thanks very much for addressing that. Move on a little bit now. There's two people have asked questions which are linked, Phil Huggins and Hilary Green, questions about membership. Essentially, what are we doing to, they're recognising that there's increasing sympathy in wildlife, there's increasing interest in wildlife, and we're all seeing that. And they're simply asking, what are we doing to try and boost our membership, to try to encourage new members? From what I see from the accounts, we're actually doing not bad. I know of lots of charities who are doing very badly, some even being threatened with closure because of problems of losing members. So I actually think we're doing quite well, but nevertheless, it's a legitimate question. What are we doing to boost membership as everyone's getting so much more interested in wildlife?
Well, the first thing is really to thank our existing members and to say, I hope you're reassured from some of the presentations earlier that we're doing quite a lot here. So we're ensuring we maintain the support of our existing membership, increasing our engagement and communication, although this is limited due to the face-to-face limitations and the government guidelines. With regard to recruiting new members, we focus on keeping a strong voice in the Trust through our website and social media channels communications. We've enhanced our online recruitment, introducing a new membership video and digital recruitment campaigns and online asks after videos, etc. Digital recruitment campaigns, which have achieved a brilliant response, thank you, linked to surveys, have been valuable insight for the Trust. We've seen retention levels of our existing membership grow this year by 1.5%. And when we were able to carefully reintroduce some face-to-face activity under strict controls, we have recruited many new members, particularly at our reserves, where we welcomed new visitors discovering wildlife for the first time. We have 1,000 new members this year.
It's a pretty good record, I think, for a difficult year. But it's a good question anyway. I mean, it's really interesting that it's really nice that actually you're getting support. People want to encourage more members to join, so that's fantastic. I mean, it kind of links to a question from Jeanette Hunter, quite broad. Are there any comments on the effect of COVID on your operations?
I could write a whole report on this.
You could. Starting off, I was just amazed. When I was chief exec for 12 years, and we spent 12 years talking about working remotely, when you had to, you did it overnight. So I think it's incredible what the Trust did. So yes, any other comments on the effect of COVID on the operation?
Well, firstly, a massive thanks to the staff, particularly the IT staff and volunteers, for enabling us to work from home so quickly. But I would say COVID has clearly had an enormous impact on the Trust this year. And I can only summarise that now. So during the spring lockdown, we had to stop all face-to-face events, volunteering, work with schools, activities, training. We have not yet been able to restart some of that this year at all. We furloughed 1/3 of the staff team, including some of the reserves team. We had to pause face-to-face recruitment. Our grazing team and lookers worked through the first lockdown with all the complexities of running a socially distanced lambing programme. The impact on the whole staff team and volunteers has been significant and has taken considerable time to manage and coordinate. The Discovery Centre opening has clearly been delayed to spring 2021, but on the positive side, we've reached new audiences with our communications, and during this challenging time, seen new visitors to the reserves and many people enjoying a relationship with wildlife for the very first time.
Excellent. You've also covered one of the other questions that was asked, and that was, when's the Discovery going to open? So I think the answer to that is spring.
Well, spring 2021. I'm sorry I can't give you an exact date, but we have to wait and see, but spring 2021. Great.
Well, that's good. Yeah. It's amazing you've managed to carry on under these circumstances. I mean, it links to, I think there's another question about COVID, because bearing in mind our financial year was up to March this year, you're going to be seeing some of the effects in the next annual report, aren't you? So I suppose, what's the outlook from what you can see so far?
Well, income has held up well, but recruitment has obviously taken a hit. So we anticipate income will be down from that. We've made good use of the furlough scheme and kept costs under tight control. We've still got 5 months of the year remaining and the situation is still very changeable. So it's really hard to predict. But we are very closely monitoring both income and costs currently and expect to end the year in a reasonable position, given the difficulties.
Great. I'm just looking at the questions. I think we've covered most of them. Philip S. asked another one from Horsham, and I wonder if we've actually covered it or not, or whether it needs a more in-depth answer. This is a question about the natural capital investment strategy. With all the housing that's going on, how is there a priority to protect? There's a priority to protect what we have in the natural capital investment strategy that we're working on. How is that going to be achieved against this massive plan for new housing? I think you've already addressed some of that, or it may need a little bit more of a think for an answer online, perhaps. Do you want to say anything more about that, Tor?
I'll just add a short amount to what's been previously said. There are significant proposals for development in the recent Horsham District Council review in the north of the district. Currently, the larger allocations are proposals and not adopted. Very little detail has been provided as part of the plan so far. And as an organisation, we will continue to engage with the council over the emerging plan and ensure that biodiversity is continually pushed up the agenda.
Excellent. And I'll say from my perspective, I did see the response of the Sussex Wildlife Trust to the planning reforms that government is proposing at the moment. And it was an excellent response. It was up there with the top responses that I've ever read. Proper challenge of all the presumptions that result in these ridiculous housing numbers. And they are ridiculous. They're not going to solve anything. So from what I saw, I thought that was a fantastic response. There's some really good strategic stuff being done by the Trust. Generally, you don't see that because it's been done by the experts behind the doors. But no, but it's good to keep up that pressure. And I think we do need to, yeah, we're facing some major problems. Now, I think that's all the questions. I'm just looking at my other computer now to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Many apologies if I do forget anything, because we have it all written down and we can address them separately. Oh, somebody's asked how to build a moth trap. I think maybe that's something we'll try to address offline, because that could be good. I think everyone should have a moth trap. They're great fun, by the way. Do moth traps. Excellent. I think that's kind of covered the questions and answers. I don't think I've forgotten anything. It's all going very well so far. Excellent. Okay.
Tony, can I just, I'm sorry, we do have another, I think there's 2 last minute questions.
Yeah, okay.
So forgive us for the managing this, it's not straightforward. So the question is, what would be the best tactic to put pressure on the government to give Natural England the resources it so desperately needs to carry out their statutory duties to support nature conservation generally and the work of the Wildlife Trust in particular? So the best approach is a national approach directly to the highest levels, clearly. For this level of influence, we look to our nationally based Wildlife Trust colleagues. At Sussex level, we feed our local examples for the need for a stronger, more effective statutory body for nature to our national colleagues. This is the benefit of being part of a movement with a national organisation that can campaign on our behalf. We also have a question, which is, I expect someone else, is there anything more we can do about the latest decision on the Arundel bypass? So I think Tony's got 25 years of experience with this, but the brief answer is yes, even though this process has been going on for decades, we're at the early stages in the agreement of a significant road project. All is not lost. We know that the capacity projections on which the proposed route is designed does not take into account the fact that we nationally plan to reach net zero. Obviously, transport emissions, which represent nearly 1/3 of UK emissions, will need to be drastically reduced. Sussex Wildlife Trust is one of many organisations nationally and locally working to influence this decision.
Great. I think, was there anything else? It's the same question. Yeah.
I think that's it. Thank you. Well, these are really good questions. We really appreciate them, and quite rightly you challenge us on these. Yeah,
absolutely. And they hit at the heart of the Wildlife Trust and the work we're doing. And I know who they're coming from. They're the sort of people who support us in this work, so thanks very much indeed. I think if there is anything we've forgotten, we'll have a look as we report this on our website, because this is being recorded. It will be on our website, and it gives us the opportunity to address it again if we think we've kind of missed anything. But I think that's been a fairly good crack of the whip, hasn't it? Excellent. I think what we'll do now is move on. We're actually ahead of time, which is great. More or less the last thing on the agenda is the David Streeter Award. Now, I think everybody on this call must know David Streeter. In fact, I hope David is actually on the call as well. He's one of the founder members of the Sussex Wildlife Trust. The Sussex Wildlife Trust wouldn't exist if it wasn't for David. And throughout its history, he's been the guiding hand for the whole of the trust. And he was president, I think, until about 2 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago. He was president, I think, from 2004 to 2017, something like that. But he's had continual history all the way through the trust. And when he resigned as president, we set up this David Streeter Award. And to recognise the work that David has done all his life to encourage young naturalists to get going in the environment, in the environmental field, we set up the David Streeter Award, which is essentially just a small thank you to a high-level young person who's gone above and beyond the normal when it comes to doing things when it comes to natural history. And it's so encouraging to see the quality of people who are being put forward. Absolutely incredible. And this year, somebody called Maya Bambrick has been put forward and is clearly a top-level person. She's on the Sussex Ornithological Council, Ornithological Society Council. She's got her own YouTube website. I've just watched one of her YouTubes. They're fantastic. She blogs, she writes articles, she's in the press. I think she's been on BBC local radio and television. An incredible ambassador for wildlife. So a very worthy winner for this year. I think perhaps we have a video from Maya. Now, is that still the case? Are we able to put up a video from Maya?
Hi everyone, my name's Maya Bambrick and I'm an 18-year-old wildlife photographer, birder and all-round nature lover living in Crawley, West Sussex. I've been passionate for wildlife since the age of 8, and from then on I've always wanted to try and engage other young people to see how amazing our wildlife here in the UK is. I've tried to do this through blogs, and I've also been lucky enough to write articles for numerous magazines such as RSBB Wingbeat. I'm also an ambassador for the Cameron Bespoke Trust, which are an organisation which aims to engage young people with nature through sponsoring events such as BTO Bird Camp, and also competitions like Wild Art run by the RSBB. I'm also an ambassador for Leica, Birding and Nature, so I hope to sort of combat stereotypes of what birders look like and try and get young female birders especially out in the field. I'm also passionate about wildlife photography, and I do vlogs, so I've done over 40 vlogs about my nature adventures and what wildlife I see on my doorstep, and I've been lucky enough to have those broadcast on Chris Packham's and Megan McCubbin's Self-Isolating Bird Club lives. So that's a bit about me, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it.
Great, thank you very much indeed. You see what I mean? A worthy proposal or what? I mean, absolutely incredible that she makes me feel so lazy. Absolutely brilliant. Now, it seems completely inappropriate to do an award over the internet. It just doesn't feel right at all. We should be in a hall. We should be asking David to come up and present the award himself. It doesn't seem right for me to say this at all, but I'm afraid we're stuck with it. So I think around Sussex, can we imagine 100 or 150 people clapping at Maya's proposal, because absolutely fantastic. And on that note, well done, Maya. A small thank you from the elderly natural history community to somebody who's clearly up and coming. Thank you very much for everything you're doing at the moment and everything I can see you're going to be doing in the future. Very, very well done. And maybe we need to think about applicants for next year as well. So I think that brings us to the end of our AGM, or AGM and follow-up talks and presentations. I think a lot of you are born with us all the way through. Yes, we've got 123 people online. Thank you very much for bearing with us through this. I must admit, it's very strange to do this in my living room, talking to a camera with no idea of how many people are looking at me. Really quite sterile. But thank you very much indeed for bearing with us all the way through. Hopefully we can meet in person next year, maybe with tea and biscuits or even a meal, I don't know. But as I say, thank you very much, not only for coming to the AGM this year and bearing with us, but also for all the support that you've given the Wildlife Trust over the past year. We have 139 attendees, which is pretty good, I think. You know, that's not bad for people who are willing to give up a fairly nice Saturday morning. You look outside, the colours are fantastic. It would be really nice to be outside there, but you've given up a fairly nice Saturday morning to hear a little bit about the Wildlife Trust. So thank you very much for giving up your time to listen to us. And thank you very much to all my fellow panelists. Thank you to I don't know whether anyone's thanked the trustees yet. I think the job they're doing is fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you again to all the staff and the volunteers and to Tor to running the team. I think that brings us to a close, doesn't it? Everything's finished. Tea and biscuits. I think we now disappear and have our tea and biscuits. Thank you very much indeed. Feels very strange. All I can say is goodbye and thank you very much for making this so easy. Excellent. Bye.